Hey everybody, welcome. This is my YouTube series on preparing Canadian personal T1 tax returns. My name is Ian DeNovo and I'm a professional accountant in Toronto and the founder and instructor at CanadianTaxAcademy.com, where I offer some practical real-world training courses in the areas of personal income tax, corporate income tax, and a number of other tax areas. If you're interested in taking some personal tax courses, you can scroll over to the bottom in the description section here at YouTube, and I do offer some promotions, or check out the pop-up bubbles that come on every now and then, and you can take courses at CanadianTaxAcademy.com for a very reasonable price that you'll find is very competitive compared to other options out there in the world of Canadian tax. So, without further ado, let's get on to the training series here. These series of 4 tutorials will teach you how to prepare a basic Canadian T1 tax return. So let's get going. Alright everyone, welcome back here to the final video here on this playlist series on preparing your Canadian personal income tax return. So in the previous tutorials here on in my playlist, we went over the example of John Smith. We looked at his income, his expenses, personal tax credits that he might be entitled to. So what I'm going to do now is just do probably what's the most important stage in preparing a personal tax return, and that's doing the final review, looking at the taxes payable, looking at the balance and the refund, just to make sure that it makes sense. So now, in my best practices course at the Canadian Tax Academy, I actually give you a step-by-step checklist as to what you should do to make sure that you have an accurate tax return. So what I'm going to do in this tutorial is I'm just going to go down and zero in on the fundamentals here in terms of making sure that you have all of the information in correctly and that you're filing a proper tax return. Now, the first thing you want to look at is you want to scroll down to the T1 return itself. Now what I have open here is the tax summary, and really all I'm doing is looking at the balance owing or the refund here. So as we can see, in John's case, he has a refund of approximately $1,100. So now if I was John, I would ask myself, well, does that make sense with what I'm used to? So I would know, if I'm preparing my own tax return, what my annual refund or balance owing is, and seeing whether or not this year is in line with those previous years. So let's just say I'm John here and I'm saying, yeah, you know what, I usually get a refund of between $1,000 and $1,500 depending on how much room I put into my RRSPs and how much my investments return. So you know what, at first glance, $1,132 looks reasonable. So I might go through the tax return just to make sure that I've entered all the information in properly, and just doing a simple reasonability, I can pretty much be comfortable and know that if I'm going to be filing this tax return, that it is accurate with the information that I have. Now let's look at a simple example here, still using John. So I'm just going to move one of the numbers around. Alright, so I just made one little minor change just to illustrate a point here in terms of doing the reasonability check. So with John here, let's assume I'm John and I'm preparing my tax return and I've entered all the information in, and I go down to the balance owing, and now I owe just under $1,900. Now if I'm John, this might not make sense to me, because I'm thinking, hey, you know what, I usually get back about $1,000 to $1,500. Why do I owe about $2,000? Nothing's really changed in terms of my taxes. Same income, same type of investment income. I put the same amount into my RRSP. You know what? Something just doesn't jive here. So what should I do? Well, in that case, you would do a thorough review of all of the information, specifically the tax slips. So in this case, most of John's taxes and all his credits are based on the slips that were provided to him. So lo and behold, John goes through his slips and he finds that on his T4, he just made a simple little typo. In box number 22, instead of typing in $9,875 of tax deducted, he typed in $6,875. So he exchanged the 6 for the 9 and made a typo, which made a substantial difference. So now if he goes back and he types in that final, the actual tax return, the actual income tax withheld, you can see now that he's back to his refund of $1,132. Now that happens quite a bit, especially if you have a lot of tax slips, or if you're a preparer and you're preparing the taxes for somebody that has a number of slips. Busy tax season, sometimes those numbers start getting a little blurry. If you have a lot of tax returns to prepare, you could easily make a mistake. So the first step when you're reviewing a tax return is print up a slip summary. So most of the tax software programs out there will actually have a slip summary. You can actually print this up and compare the actual slips to what you entered into the software. And obviously when you do that, it's pretty simple to catch those typos or maybe a missed box that would have an effect on the tax return itself. All right, let's look at another example here of a review that you can do. And this is especially important if you're a tax preparer and you're preparing the tax return for for a client. All right, now here we have what's called the Comparative Tax Summary. So this is a very important tool. We use this quite a bit in the Preparing Tax Returns from Start to Finish Best Practices course. And what this does is it compares the current year taxes to the prior year taxes. So this is a great way to review your own return or review the return of the person that you're preparing. So as you can see here, we have this particular taxpayer, and the first thing you do is just scan over it and see whether or not there's any substantial changes from one year to the next. So as we can see here, there's some employment income that looks reasonable, all the RPP, and there's some RRSP contributions there. Looks like all the union and professional dues are in there. There was a little bit of an increase. Now if we go to the credits section here, so this portion here is actually taken from the Schedule 1, but it's a great way to review the credits from one year to the next. So just looking at this without getting into too much detail, you can see that there's some credits in 2014 that aren't on the 2015 return. So you have to ask yourself, why is that? Maybe those credits are no longer available. Maybe those were missed. So maybe there was some information on last year's tax return that you completely forgot on this year's tax return, or the client completely forgot to give it to you. So this is a great way to look at a client's tax return or your tax return to make sure you have everything and everything is consistent from year to year. That's one of the things the CRA does look at quite closely, is the comparative information from year to year. So if you have a big tax credit one year that you didn't have last year, well, you can probably rest assured that the CRA might ask to see some documentation on that once you actually go and file the return. And what I like to do here as well is, obviously, like we did with John's example, if we go to the bottom line here, we can compare this year's balance owing or refund to last year's. And this is probably the best way to capture changes or to capture mistakes, or most importantly, which is usually the case, to capture things that are missing from the file, missing from the tax return. So it's a very important step. In the Best Practices tax course, we go through a few case studies and I'll show you how to do it accurately, how to analyze it, how to approach reviewing it and discussing it with the client, and will save you a lot of time in preparing tax returns, especially if you're getting into the tax preparation business, or if you are a student in accounting and you want that some of that job ready training by looking over my shoulder as we go through actual tax returns. So that does it here for this YouTube tutorial, this series on preparing Canadian personal tax returns, the T1 returns. As I've mentioned throughout the series, if you're interested in learning how to prepare personal taxes or corporate taxes, head on over to CanadianTaxAcademy.com. You can register there without taking any courses if you want to keep informed of some tax matters or upcoming courses, or if you want to learn that practical side of things, if you want to get that job ready experience, come on over, take whatever tax course appeals to you. They're all reasonably priced compared to some of the other options available on there, and you get instant access. So that does it, folks. Thanks for tuning in here. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this series informative, and I hope to see you over at the CanadianTaxAcademy.com website soon. Bye for now.